yes, it does have a positive impact, but it's the right tech used in the right way impacts positively for teachers and their students.
You're listening to Around the School Table, hosted by me, Steve Davis, and proudly powered by Xuno Suite. We'll be bringing together the many voices shaping primary and secondary education across Australia, from principals and teachers to education thought leaders and system innovators. Whether you're in the classroom, the staff room, or the boardroom, this is your podcast to be informed, inspired, and connected. Today on Around the School Table, we're joined by Rebecca Woolnough, Area Manager for Oceania at Smart Technologies, the company shaping the future of interactive learning in classrooms all around the world. Rebecca brings a fresh perspective on balancing technology and pedagogy, from the pitfalls of divisolation to the impact of thoughtfully designed accessible learning tools. Now, in this chat, we're going to dive into how schools can put learning goals before hardware decisions, the power of neurodiversity-informed design, and classroom possibilities unlocked by tools like the Smartboard Mini. If you're interested in making tech truly work for students and teachers, Rebecca's insights are ones you'll want to lean in and listen closely to. And on that note, Rebecca, welcome to Around the School Table.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Rebecca, you've said 1 to 3 devices are better than 1-to-1 because 1-to-1 leads to what you call divisolation. Can you explain what you mean by that succulent term?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it is a term that I've made up. I have been in education for 20 years, and I was a classroom teacher for 16 of those, in charge of developing our digital strategy that underpinned our pedagogical strategy. And look, the age-old question of tech in classrooms, is it impacting positively or negatively, is one that I always come back to that brought up this discussion, right? So yes, tech is effective, and yes, it does have a positive impact, but it's the right tech used in the right way impacts positively for teachers and their students. And that's where the discussion around 1-to-1 devices comes, because we run through all of the research from NACE, from OECD, from ISTE, and we know that more tech in classrooms does not equal better outcomes. It's about choosing the right tech and using it in the right way. So having that 1-to-1 device is helpful in some situations, but I always advocate that in a learning environment, we give the students those opportunities to share those devices. So particularly for our younger students, I do advocate 1-to-2, 1-to-3 devices, whether it's an iPad, whether it's a Chromebook, whether it's a laptop. And even for our older students, when they're working in small or large groups, having that one device or shared devices to be able to complete those learning tasks. Because when we have 1-to-1 devices, and we all know it, we see it on the train or the tram or our commute to work or on the bus or on the planes, as soon as you've got a device in your hand, that's what gets your attention, and you divisolate yourself essentially. You hone into the device in your hand and the rest of the world disappears. When we open that up, when we have a discussion, when we have an activity or a learning experience that our students need to complete, pushing them into an environment where they have to share that allows us to create that learning space that encourages and enhances those 21st century skills or the entrepreneurial skills or the soft skills, whatever lovely term that we're using these days. It enhances those communication, collaboration, critical thinking, negotiation, problem-solving skills, because they have to work together to actually to complete that task. And so the task no longer becomes, the technology now does not become the focus of the activity, but the outcome of the activity is the focus.
I almost wish we could apply this rule in households and life. Wouldn't that be perhaps one way to guard against people being locked in their own little echo chambers? Because when you're sharing, there's conversation over not just use of the device, but content and inputs, etc.
Yeah, Absolutely. And look, and that's the thing, right? Is how do you translate that into not only K to 12 but higher ed and then work? Because you know it yourself, when you get on a work call and someone pulls up a PowerPoint and it's 60 pages, your eyes roll into the back of your head and you go, I'm just going to open up my emails and see if I can do that. And you tune out, right? And so we're consciously developing technology that enables true collaboration and interactivity. And that's what goes into our boards and our software.
I would say my 60-page PowerPoints are entertaining, just for the record.
I don't doubt it.
Now, Rebecca, you've got this clear process. You start with the learning outcomes,
Yep.
then you think about pedagogy, then software, and finally the hardware. Where do schools usually jump the gun or miss a step? And what sort of impact does that have?
Yeah, so we often refer to, or I often refer to it as the shiny-bauble syndrome, and I was one of those teachers that fell for it. 2005, when I came out into teaching, I was dubbed the unofficial digital tech person before they were an actual official role. Usually because I was the youngest on staff, or because I knew how to use the height of technology back then, which was the Motorola flip phone.
Wow.
From there, yeah, absolutely. So we looked at how the tech was actually impacting the outcomes, and we call this the formula for success. A lot of us usually choose the hardware first. Karen in year 3 wants Ozobots, and Steve in year 2 wants Spiros, and we buy them for those classrooms, and they would be amazing in 1% of the teaching and learning time. And then Karen and Steve would either move class or they would move school, and that piece of tech would then go on the shelf and collect dust, and it wouldn't translate across the curriculum. It wouldn't scale across the year levels. And so that investment wasn't really impacting the outcomes for the students or the teachers. So when I went to Sheldon College and became a digital pedagogical coach, we started looking at it from an evaluation point of view. So we put a lot of tech in classrooms, but do we actually evaluate whether this tech is impacting the outcomes for both the students and the teachers? And we did something called an edtech assessment tool. It basically gave us a blueprint or a baseline of where we were at with our digital strategy in terms of infrastructure, in terms of PL, in terms of decision-making and design. And what we learned from that, and it was actually a smart thing. We didn't realise it at the time. It was a smart technologies tool that we used. We always talk about that formula for success. So a lot of us start with the hardware, and that's probably our first mistake or our biggest mistake. What we actually need to do is start with our exit outcomes. So what do we want our students to leave our classroom, leave our school with? What type of characteristics do we want to instill in our students? We need to back map that to the learning outcomes. So what kind of learning outcomes, what kind of pedagogy are we actually going to implement in our classrooms to support those exit outcomes, to support the development of those characteristics in our students? The next step back would be then, well, what is the software that supports that pedagogy? So what software tools or platforms am I going to use to enhance the feedback cycle, to improve mathematics skills, or create student-centered learning to enable my students to enhance voice and choice and agency? The final step in that formula for success is the hardware. And the hardware at the end should remove the barriers for the users. That's essentially what it should do. It should simplify how they interact with their content. And that's a really hard thing to get right, but it is really important because if it's too complex, if it's too hard, then we all know, and in my world, it's interactive flat panels, we know they become just static TVs and over-glorified windows to a screen share, right? But essentially what we need to do is remove those barriers so the teachers can interact with the content, so the students can interact with the content, and they can interact with each other and enhance that learning environment. And then finally, you should wrap all of that up with targeted professional learning. So it shouldn't just be, this is a pen and this is the button and it does this. It should be around, well, how do we use this technology to enhance the feedback cycle in writing to improve writing skills for year 2? And that's the formula for success. We don't start with the hardware, we start with the outcomes, and then we back map that, and the hardware should come last.
Because as you think about it, most software should be platform agnostic to a degree. And I find it counterintuitive about the hardware being chosen to make it easy and not get in the way, because I just automatically assume all hardware is fairly neutral. And, I'm probably photoshopping out the hours of pain and having to learn new methodologies of doing things. Yeah, that's deceptively profound.
Yes, it is. Well, it comes from a teacher, right? I've had to battle my way or feel like I'm pushing a boulder up a hill by myself to try and figure all of these things out. So, and it does feel lonely sometimes. And our teachers don't have time to have to learn everything or think for the tech that's in their classroom. If we're buying tech where they have to tell it what to do, there's no point in having it, right?
Now, I've heard you talk about the neurodiversity report with the University of Melbourne. It includes things like reducing clutter, letting kids respond anonymously, etc. What stood out to you in that research, and how have you seen those ideas work in actual real life?
Yeah, so many things have stood out, and it is something I'm really passionate about, both personally and professionally. And another reason why, I stepped out of the classroom and joined a company to actually make an impact on education. That's what Smart do really well. They don't spend a lot of money on events or things like that. They spend money on things that are meaningful to help R&D, because we want to make sure they're purpose-built for the classroom. So this piece of research was done with Melbourne University. It stands out for a lot of reasons. There's roughly, I think, 1,700 or 1,400 pieces of research on neurodivergence. A very small amount of them, I think 4, don't quote me, involved some form of student voice, whereas ours was run by researchers who all had lived experience with neurodivergence. It was also centred around student and teacher voice, and it was based on UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. So how do we create learning environments that support all students without them seeking accommodation, that also make it easier for teachers, because teachers have got so many things that they've got to do, achieve, learn, know, be on top of in that classroom. They shouldn't have to do extra work to be able to do their job. We should be making technology and software platforms that make their life easier to be able to deliver better outcomes. And that's what this research was about. I think some of the things that came out of it were really, really wonderful. And a lot of our teachers are really trying to work hard at achieving all of these, and they are through a lot of work. And we can simplify that by the tools that we can invest in and use. So things like creating multiple ways for students to engage, to show what they know. That's one of the 36 recommendations that came out of the research. So there's 36 that you could implement in your classrooms tomorrow. That was really important to me as a teacher. Love getting research. That's wonderful. I often have a bit of a bugbear about the fact that research is often done by people who aren't in the classrooms, and they come and try and tell me how to do my job. Whereas this is done by real teachers, and it's 36 recommendations you can put in your classroom and we know are actually going to improve the outcomes for you and your students. So if you take just that simple one outcome, right, the recommendation, creating multiple ways for students to engage, to show what they know. If you put that into practice, in this event that we did at edtech, we launched this research and we delivered this research in a way that I would teach in my classroom. So it actually involved the 36 recommendations. We implemented what were preaching, right? So the one question that we did was, what does neurodivergence mean to you? And the way we did it was we delivered it in a shout it out, which was part of our software. It's a wonderful way that doesn't matter what device you've got, you can connect via a QR code by the web, and you can write your answer or talk to the device and it will annotate for you, and you can send up your response and it gets captured on the board. Now, in this activity, what I gave them was 3 different ways to respond. They could answer pragmatically, so tell us, why the research was important to them. They could do it in a creative way, or they could do it in an analytical way. And for me, I'm someone that is more practical. I like to go down the practical route. I'm not very creative. And so that I would gravitate towards that. So as a teacher, I would probably tend to stick to that, right? But in this event, the biggest moment for me was at the end of this activity where we were looking through the responses and the amount of people that wrote poems and wonderful, drew lovely drawings and sent them up to show what neurodivergence means to them was not only super powerful for me as the presenter, but for the people in the audience that got to share what they know in a way that feels true to them. That was beyond powerful. And the amount of LinkedIn posts I saw of those people sharing their poems from that day was exceptional. And that just shows just one tweak, one change of how we approach a learning outcome, or using the right tool for the right reason can have such a positive impact on the people that you're working with or teaching. And that really stayed with me.
Wow, that is sharing a bit of overlap. There's a book I'm reading at the moment called The Fourth Pillar by Harry Moffat. He's a former SAS operator turned psychologist, and he's argued that the fourth pillar is the psychological aspects of our life and being sensitive to different ways of communicating and the impoverishment of just language alone. There's more. And what you've talked about is by giving another option for creatively responding, I think we're going to scoop up in that sort of scenario more than we might otherwise have gleaned from people and perhaps been delighted and learned something ourselves from those approaches.
100%. And it wasn't a difficult thing for me to do. I delivered the lesson in the same amount of time, in the same way that I normally would. I just gave them a different avenue to be able to express themselves in a way that was true to them. And that was what made them feel like they were heard.
Yeah.
And that's really, really powerful. And that's what we need to give to our students. And that is really important to me. So we've taken that research, we've put it into the software. So if you need to be able to create multiple ways for students to deliver this, then here it is. All you have to do is use this activity or tweak that page. And that's what we should do. Our moral obligation as tech developers, we need to be able to be looking at these types of things and going, well, how do we develop that into our software and make the lives of our teachers easier?
Still wrestling with clunky reports? Switch to Accelerus, the gold standard in school reporting. From semester to continuous reporting, design stunning reports in Word, pull data from multiple sources, and share with a click. Easy, flexible, beautiful. Accelerus. Love at first report. Visit xuno.com.au.
Now, enough time has elapsed since you had a glancing blow at my beloved PowerPoints, so I want to come back to that topic now. I've steeled myself. There's a quote of yours: in 15 minutes with a smartboard, you can turn a boring old PDF or PowerPoint into something interactive. How do you actually do that? And what's the reaction from teachers when they see how quick and easy it can be?
The aha moment. I like to call it the demo candy, because as a teacher, that was the thing that got me. And look, I have nothing against PowerPoints. Great, still working it. But working it more interactively, make it more interesting. Or for someone like me, I learn by colour and placement on page. So if you're drawing on the whiteboard, or if you're drawing on marking up a document, that's how I'm building a connection to that content. If you've highlighted an equation in yellow and circled a part of that equation in red and wrote a note on it, that's how I've built my connection to it. And so if you give me a clean version of that document, that's then severed the meaning for me, and I have to start again and rebuild it, right? So being able to ink directly into those documents and save those documents as their native format and then give it to my students immediately is really, really powerful to support learning. Predominantly, and the argument will be, well, that's for more high school, higher ed. Absolutely. That is exactly how we support our learners in that respect. But it's the same for our younger students too. We share things on Seesaw or Google Classroom. we need to be able to mark these documents up and share them as we've marked them up. If you want to take that one step further, because when you implement tech, you need to implement tech in stages, right? There are your innovators of teachers who will just pick it up and just go crazy with it and be amazing. There's our leaders who are not always strong in tech, but really strong in pedagogy, and they'll figure out ways that it impacts their outcomes more effectively, and that's how they'll use the tech. But then we also have our teachers who are skeptics, or what we affectionately call Luddites. They've had bad experiences with tech, or they've lost their confidence, or it's unfamiliar to them, and so they really don't want to use it. So we need to think about those teachers. So when we're doing an adoption and a rollout or an implementation plan, we talk about behaviour change, right? Don't change the behaviours of the teachers, just give them more interactivity into the content or into the work they're already doing. So if they're already doing PowerPoints and PDFs, amazing. Pick up a pen, write into it, save those annotations, share them as you normally would. In PDFs, because you can mark up into it and save those annotations, your students who have functional adjustment needs where they don't like to write on paper and pen for sensory reasons, or visual, low vision impaired, they can work on the smartboard, do their work samples on the smartboard, and you can save it. And that made a really big impact into a local classroom here around the corner from me, being able to support a student who is adverse to working in their books, right? But then you've got to cater for your other teachers who want to take it that next step further. Well, what if I want to take that PowerPoint and that PDF, merge them together in the one learning resource and add games and interactivity into those pages? Well, that's where our software and our hardware comes into play. So you are able to take a PowerPoint, a PDF, a Google Slides, and you can enhance it and make it dynamic and collaborative by adding a shouted out activity like we spoke about earlier, by adding an assessment tool in there that will mark the work for them, give them their results and give you their results as well, and export that out into an Excel spreadsheet. You can add games into the content. You can add small group, whole class or individual activities on certain pages. So if you have a PowerPoint, you can pick page 2 and it's going to be an individual activity, or page 5 and it'll be a whole class activity. And when you share it with your students, they can then interact with it on their one-to-one devices, or better yet, one-to-many devices. And so it's not about reinventing the wheel. Again, we go back to that time, right? Our teachers don't have a lot of time. They also don't want to spend a lot of time learning new platforms. So take the content you already have and just enhance it. And we already have that content ready to go for them. So yes, PowerPoint can be monotonous, but again, using the right tech in the right way will actually enhance the outcomes for the teachers. So improve time, improve their capability of capturing data, and then improve the outcomes for the students as well.
Now, you've mentioned devices a couple of times. Let's just pick one, like the Smartboard Mini. The way you talk about that, it sounds like a bit like an old school overhead projector, but smarter. How do you see something like this used in the classroom? What does it unlock for teachers?
Yeah, so the Smartboard Mini is a 27-inch smartboard, essentially. The brains are in the arm, so you can adjust the tilt as much as you want. So it can lay flat, or it can go on a 45-degree angle, or sit straight up at 90 degrees. It is basically the power of a smartboard in a 27-inch device that can be used as a second screen or a personal device. So if we look at K-12, in K-12, we see them a lot in intervention rooms. So the rooms where teachers' aides or support teachers will take students that are individually or in small groups of 3 into the room and work on a particular learning concept. In those types of rooms, throwing on a 55-inch smartboard on the wall is too overpowering. It's not fit for purpose, right? And that's what we're really focused on, fit for purpose technology. So being able to put that device on the table and allowing them to work in the content together in a small group or individually, really, really powerful, because you can zoom it in for anyone that has eyesight functionality issues. For my students who have dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, they can change the background colours to support their learning. For my students who want to take notes or add notes in or do the activity on the Smartboard Mini, they can actually do it without having to change anything or do any extra work, and you can save all of that as you go. In the higher years, we see it a lot in science labs or in maths labs where the teachers want to work up an equation or work up a science concept facing the students, and they can have one of two things, or well, they can do both if they want. They can push that content directly out to the students' devices so that the students can see it, kind of like screen sharing but more powerful, or in that scenario they can actually make it interactive for the students so the teacher and the students can interact with that content together at the same time. And equally, if they want the whole class to be able to see it, it can feed up to, say, a projector or a larger screen behind them. In higher ed, we see that a lot, right? In podiums, in lecture halls, they have the smart board mini so they can mark up their PowerPoints and their documents and all of the students can see it. But equally, we're starting to see it filter into the tutorial rooms where students want to use it as their own personal device to be able to interact with the content and digest the content in a way that suits their learning needs. So we're starting to see, tutorial rooms have 8 to 10 smartboard minis, and the students can either book them or use them if they're not already booked up. And what one of the universities is doing is actually getting more because the smartboard minis are being booked out every session.
Wow, what an exciting time to be alive. And look, in closing, this has been a lovely chat, Rebecca, but I want to just push you into some dangerous territory.
Oh, here we go.
There's a few different thoughts swimming around in some of this education sector. And it's, teachers, they're human. They get tired. Sometimes they bring bias to a classroom. And that then leads to a thought, well, could a smartboard actually become the teacher as AI evolves, etc., supposedly playing the straight bat on everything? Where do you sit on this? Because you've got a foot in both camps. You're sort of the foot in tech and you come from teaching. Are you cautious about this encroachment of AI in the classroom? Are you keen to see where it's going? Give yourself a chance to endear yourself to our listening teachers or put them all on edge.
I think your question has multiple layers, so I'm going to approach it as such. Firstly, is AI ever going to replace our teachers? Absolutely not. Knowledge has been and has always been ubiquitous. The teacher's role is to be able to build scaffolding in for our students to understand how to question, how to analyse, how to understand, and we're there to support those learning needs. So, no, the teacher plays a critical role that AI can never do. You are seeing all of these new applications that are using AI to tailor these teaching tutorials and things like that. It will never be the same. Coming from someone who's doing a master's in cybersecurity and it's all online, I still need a teacher. I don't see that ever changing. In terms of having AI in the schools, yes, there is a place. As a manufacturer, we approach that with caution. AI for teachers, absolutely. To create content, absolutely. To automate those types of things that take up a lot of cognitive load but are actually can be automated, absolutely. Marking, creating lesson content, creating questions for games, things like that. We have that in our software. You can even go, Lumio, make me a lesson on the water cycle for a year 2 class, and it will develop that for you, and then you can edit it. AI for students, we need to be a bit more cautious. I definitely think we need to take a more measured approach to that, and jurisdictions are. To the point that I actually, as a student, find AI really helpful in terms of digesting information, finding a starting point, scaffolding, all of those types of things, and students will need to use that. I love to use the example of a non-writer in Year 2. So I've had students in Year 2 that are fantastic in certain areas, but when it comes to creative writing, they really struggle. They really struggle to get started, right? And so we used to use DALL-E and give a crazy explanation of make me A, and a kitten in a snow globe on a Hawaiian beach, right? And then it'll give them an image. That then becomes their writing prompt. So again, I circle it back, and it probably comes to a full circle moment. The right tech used in the right way enhances the teaching and learning in the classroom. And so I think the approach to AI needs to be like that. Yeah.
I'd summarise that answer like this. AI can help create a lesson on the rain cycle, but as far as teachers are concerned, it's not going to rain on their parade.
Oh, I love it.
There you go.
You should do this for a living.
Rebecca Woolnough, thank you very much for being part of Around the School Table.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.